Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. I am your host, Sarah, and today's episode is brought to you by adamandeve.com, where for a limited time only, you'll get 50% off just about any item on their website. Just type in the promo code HEALTH, HEALTH, at checkout. Welcome again. I am your host, Sarah, and this is the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, just in case you didn't hear me the first time. So if you tuned in a couple of weeks ago, you may have caught the episode where I talked about Halloween and Halloween candy that leads to Thanksgiving pie, that leads to Christmas cookie exchanges and Christmas pies and Christmas cakes and Christmas candy and Christmas this and Christmas that, and then New Year's champagne and all of those lovely calories that we just consume between Halloween and New Year's. And today I wanted to talk a little bit more about the holidays because they are coming. I mean, I know we just got into November, but in a couple of weeks it's going to be Thanksgiving, and then we just crash land into Christmas. It doesn't take any time at all. You blink, and it doesn't take any time at all. And I want to talk in today's episode about stress and depression and anxiety that can happen around the holidays. And I want to talk about it now because once you're in the midst of stress, once you're in the middle of depression, it's really hard to be able to stop and breathe and regroup. So it's important to think about those things. If you tend to get stressed before the holidays, if you know that the holidays can sometimes trigger your depression or your anxiety, it's good to have a contingency plan. Especially if this is your first holiday after something major like a divorce or a death of someone close to you, it's really important to know that you're going into the holidays with that grief or anger or whatever emotion you're feeling, sadness, and it's okay to feel those things, but it's also good to have a plan because your health is important. Your mental health is really important, and taking care of yourself is extremely important. So have some plans in place for the holidays in case you find yourself getting stressed, getting overwhelmed, getting depressed, whatever it is. You know, the holidays can be just a crazy time. In addition to all the food that is there tempting us, there's the shopping, the baking, the cleaning, the errands, the parties, the entertaining, the this and that and the other thing. There's so many things that you can do, so many things that sometimes you have to do. So you can minimize the stress that comes with the holidays, and hopefully you might even end up enjoying the holidays more than you're anticipating if you are anticipating some levels of stress. So I found an article on the Mayo Clinic website, mayoclinic.org, talking about stress and the holidays, and it gives some tips to help prevent holiday stress and depression. So I'm going to go off of their list, tell you what their tips are. They have 10 tips, and so I'm not going to just read the article to you, but I'm going to just use it as an outline. So use their tips, and then we can talk more about each tip as we come to it. So, as I said, when you're in the midst of stress or whatever strong emotion that you're having, it's really hard to try and stop and figure out what you can do to regroup in the midst of that emotion. So it's important to prevent the stress and the depression if you can, but know but know that you know that it's coming, and at least try to come up with some contingency plans before it gets here. So number 1, acknowledge your feelings. This is especially important if you are newly in grief, whether that's grief of a relationship. You may have just broken up with someone. You may have recently been through a divorce. Someone very close to you may have recently died. And the holidays can be so hard when that happens, when you're in the midst of grief. I am Lutheran, and so when I was an adult, I learned about something called Blue Christmas. And it was when I was living in Montana that I first experienced it, although I know that many other denominations and many other churches across the country have similar services. So in the midst of all the Advent services and the beautiful Christmas carol services and the Christmas Eve service, a lot of churches set aside a time for what they call a Blue Christmas. And that is for people who don't always find joy in the holidays. For people who are feeling those emotions of grief or anger or whatever it is, they set aside this time and place to acknowledge that not everyone feels the same during the holiday season. So the one thing that you need to remember is if you're having these feelings, you need to acknowledge them. Don't bury them because you think no one wants to know that you're sad during the holidays. What you're feeling is what you're feeling. No one else can put a timeline on your grief. If they try to, that says more about them than it does about you. It says they are uncomfortable with your grief and they want you to move on. But your grief, as I said, is your grief. And you have to move through it in whatever ways are healthiest for you. So if you're feeling sad during the holidays, you need to acknowledge that. Don't bury it. Don't try to just go through the holidays like you always do. Acknowledge those feelings. Take the time to cry if you need to. Take the time to go in a quiet room by yourself and scream if you need to. Do whatever you need. And if you have someone that you can talk to, find someone to express your feelings. If you don't feel like you can talk to somebody at that point, find another way to express those feelings. Write them down. Do something proactive, though, in order to express those feelings. You can't simply force happiness just because it's the holidays. You're going to find times of joy in the holidays. They're going to shine through those moments of darkness here and there, but that's going to be a lot tougher if you're burying your feelings of grief or sadness or whatever it is you're going through. So number 1, acknowledge your feelings. The second one is reach out. This is kind of like what I said earlier with expressing your feelings. So if you're lonely or you feel isolated, which can happen at the holidays, don't just stay in that isolation. Find somewhere where you can be around people. Find a community. Maybe it's a religious community. Maybe it's social events. Maybe there's all kinds of communities. You know what you're interested in. Find something that will offer you support, that will offer you companionship during this time. You can volunteer somewhere. That's a really good place to reach out. There's all kinds of places that need volunteers, especially at the holidays. And if there's something that you feel passionate about, get out there and find something that's going to give you community. Because really, when we think about the holidays, we tend to think about spending them with friends or family or whomever, but we think about spending them in community. And if you're feeling lonely, make sure you seek out community. Take the time to find a group that you can be a part of. And if you're feeling lonely, invite people over. If that's something that you feel comfortable doing and you've got other friends who may not have a place to go during the holidays, invite them to your place. Doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be. It's going to be special because it will be people gathered together during the holidays, not alone, in company, sharing each other's joy, sharing each other's day and experiences. So number 2, reach out. We are going to take our first break of the podcast, but when we come back, I'll be talking more about these tips and ways to try to alleviate some of the stress or depression that can come around the times of the holidays. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. We'll be right back. So as the holidays get closer and you start thinking about your Christmas list and what you want to buy for people, especially your significant other, are you maybe thinking about trying to spice things up in the bedroom? Have you been fantasizing about surprising your lover with an adventurous new toy or an adult movie? Well, here's an offer that you won't be able to resist. Just go to adamandeve.com, and for a limited time only, you'll get 50% off of just about any item. But that's not all. When you select your one item at 50% off, you'll also receive 3 free adult DVDs. For that little bit of inspiration, plus a free extra mystery gift. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. To top it off, they're going to throw in free shipping on your entire order. They are not kidding. So check out adamandeve.com today for this special offer. Get 50% off one item when you type in health, that's HEALTH, at the checkout. And when you do, you'll get 3 free DVDs, a free extra gift, and free shipping. Just use the promo code HEALTH, that's HELT, at adamandeve.com. GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. We are talking about some tips to help you get through those stressful times during the holidays. We have covered 2 so far. They have been acknowledge your feelings and reach out, which leads us to number 3, and that is be realistic. This kind of comes with acknowledging your feelings, right? You have to acknowledge that there's something else going on, and when you acknowledge that, then hopefully you can be realistic about what is going to happen. The holidays don't have to be perfect. This is true every year. This is true regardless if you've had something major happen in your life. The holidays don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be just like they were last year. The holidays can be perfect in whatever form they take. If it's quieter than last year, that's okay. If it's different than last year, that's okay. As our families grow and change, of course, our traditions and our rituals are going to change as well. When a couple gets married or moves in together, they have to figure out what traditions they're going to take forward together, and that's going to change the traditions in some ways of their immediate families because, they might not be with you every year. So be realistic about what's going to happen with your holidays. You may choose to create new traditions. You may choose to maybe modify some of your traditions to better fit what's going on. If you're feeling stressed during the holidays, don't go as crazy as you might do in other years. Don't put the pressure on yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. Holidays are about the families, right? Your families and your friends and being around people that you care about. Find new ways to celebrate if things are going to be different this year for you, especially if you are in grief or if you are feeling depressed or anxious about the holidays. Please know that they don't have to be perfect. You can have a wonderful holiday experience without having it look like a Hallmark movie. And, I love Hallmark movies. That's one of my favorite things to do during the Christmas season because they're silly and they're funny, usually in a cheesy kind of way, and everything works out in the end. It always snows, it doesn't matter. There's always snow in Christmas movies, right? There's almost always Santa Claus. There's often furry little animals, but our lives aren't a Hallmark movie. So don't try to make your life a Hallmark movie. Be realistic about your expectations. Be realistic about your traditions. Be realistic about the holiday season. Number 4 is set aside differences. This one can be so hard, right? Because we have those differences in our lives, in our families, with our friends. But try to accept those family members and those friends as they are, even when they don't live up to your expectations. Set aside those grievances until a more appropriate time for discussion, as in, don't decide it's time to air those grievances while you're carving the Thanksgiving turkey, right? Not the appropriate time. Just put a pin in it, set it aside for a later time when you can actually sit down and have a conversation about whatever it is that has caused the grievance in the first place. Be understanding if others get upset or distressed when something happens during the holidays, because you might not be the only one that is feeling stress, anxiety, depression, whatever it might be. And this goes for those of you who are listening who don't experience a lot of stress or depression or anxiety during the holidays. Try to be understanding when others are. Don't use those cliches about, of course everything gets better, but don't use cliches like everything happens for a reason, or just you know what they are. For some reason I'm drawing a complete blank on cliches right now, but everyone reacts to the holidays differently. And so if they aren't reacting the way you want them to, just try to be understanding. Don't try to force everyone into your same holiday box. Again, it's not a Hallmark movie. Don't try to make your friends and family be a holiday movie, okay? Or a Hallmark movie or a holiday movie. Things happen. Things go wrong. Don't stress too much about it. And don't force others to live up to your expectations for what you think the perfect holiday should be. Number 5 is stick to a budget. So, before you go gift and food shopping, decide just how much you can afford to spend. Not how much you want to spend, how much you can afford to spend. I have 5 nieces, and I actually have a relatively small immediate family. I only have 2 siblings. So 2 siblings and 5 nieces and my parents and my brother-in-law, and then of course my husband now. But I love Christmas and I love buying presents. But not every year is the same in terms of the budget. And there's so many things. Once Halloween is over, Christmas just blows up everywhere, right? It's on all the commercials. It's in all the stores. It's everywhere. And it's so easy to get sucked into that winter wonderland that you see everywhere. And you just want to buy stuff, right? Not everyone is like this. Some people hate Christmas shopping. Some people hate shopping in general. Some people hate buying gifts. But, I love it. But going into unnecessary debt for Christmas isn't healthy either, and that is going to add to your stress after the holidays. When you realize that you have completely blown your budget, you maybe can't afford to pay the bills that you need to pay. So make holidays special in other ways, whether that's a family gift exchange where everyone draws names, whether that's making homemade gifts. There's all kinds of things that you can do, creating traditions, especially with your children, that you can continue through the years that they might enjoy. These are all ways to make the season special without blowing your budget out of the water. Don't try to buy happiness with gifts. You can try, there's all kinds of ways that you can show your love, show your appreciation without spending a fortune. So stick to a budget because it's going to help you out in the long run. It's going to make you less stressed once the holidays are over. Number 6, plan ahead. Set aside specific days for shopping, baking, visiting friends, and other activities. Plan your menus and then make your shopping list. So do everything you can to prevent last-minute scrambling to buy forgotten ingredients, forgotten gifts, forgotten this or that. There's going to be things that pop up that you may have to scramble for. But the more you plan, the better off you'll be. This one I love because I love lists. I could make a list for everything. I love making lists and crossing things off. I love lists so much that I will write something at the top that I have already done just so I can cross something off immediately. If you're not a list person, give it a shot. There's all, you can type notes to yourself in your phone, but plan ahead because you're trying to eliminate stress, right? And if stress for you triggers anxiety or depression, this is especially important. So plan ahead. I mentioned on another podcast recently, I don't even remember which one it was, but I had a boyfriend in college who only bought Christmas presents on Christmas Eve at the gas station. And every time I think about that, I just think, oh my gosh, what do you find at Christmas Eve, on Christmas Eve at a gas station? I don't even want to know what gifts he gave. That wasn't because he wasn't planning ahead. He just hated shopping and he refused to do it until the last possible second. So, that might be your MO. I'm not here to judge where you buy your Christmas presents, but if you're trying to avoid stress, if you're trying to avoid anxiety, then planning ahead is really, really helpful. We do have to take our second break of the podcast, but when we come back, we will be looking at more of this list. And number 7 is a good one. Learn to say no. So we'll talk more about that after the break. You're listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, and we will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. Again, we are talking about stress, anxiety, depression, all of those things that can happen during the holidays, and we are talking about planning ahead to try to minimize some of those emotions. And I told you straight out before the break that number 7 is learn to say no. Oh, this is a tough one for so many people, myself included. And again, it's because I love the holidays. I want to have those wonderful, perfect memories. And so we sometimes find ourselves saying yes when we don't want to. But saying yes when you really should say no can actually leave you feeling resentful and overwhelmed. So when you say yes, but then you go into whatever it is you've said yes to feeling resentful and overwhelmed, you're not going to do your best. You're not going to be any fun to be around. You're not going to be helpful in the best way that you can be. So friends, colleagues, family, whatever it might be, they will understand if you can't participate in every project or activity. Some people are going to be, maybe a little snarky or snippy about it, but you have to put yourself first sometimes. You have to take into consideration your physical, emotional, spiritual health and create boundaries to make sure that that health stays intact as best as possible. Saying yes is going to put more pressure on you. It's hard to say no sometimes. It's really hard to create those boundaries and stick to those boundaries. But it will help you in the long run. And if it's not possible to say no for whatever reason, maybe you have to work overtime for some reason when your boss asks you, or maybe there's something that you really, really feel passionate about that you just can't set aside this year, then try to remove something else from your list of scheduled events or activities so that you can create more space for you. Rushing through the holidays, going from one activity to another is just going to exhaust you. So create some space for you. Set those boundaries. Learn to say no. I know it's hard, but it will help, I promise. Number 8, don't abandon healthy habits. Yeah. So this is kind of what I was talking about the other day, right? Overindulgence. It's so much fun, except that it's not, because you feel like crap later, right? You eat that whole bag of Halloween candy, or you eat that whole Thanksgiving pie, whatever it is. And then you later on, first of all, your stomach feels horrible and your stress and maybe your guilt level go up because you did what you said you weren't going to do. So here's some suggestions that this article has for this, and that is have a healthy snack before holiday parties so that you don't go overboard on sweets or cheese or drinks or whatever it is, and, try to make yourself a little more full before you go. Sometimes this works for me, and sometimes I see the chocolate and I just can't resist, and I'm working on it. Moderation is important. You can have a little bit of chocolate, right? But you don't need to have a plate of chocolate or a box of chocolate or whatever it is for you that you tend to overindulge in. Try to have that healthy snack before the holiday party. And, if you're going with someone, maybe have some kind of a signal where they can come and say, hey, you want to step away from the chocolate for a minute? It's always good to have backup plans and friends who have your back. Another healthy habit to not abandon is sleep. Try to get plenty of sleep. This is important regardless. As a nation, as a people, we don't get enough sleep. Overall, we do not get enough sleep. And it's just one of those things, as our society gets busier, we don't sleep enough or we don't sleep well. So try to get plenty of sleep because you know that you're going to be busier than usual. And when do those feelings of stress and depression and anxiety hit you the hardest? It's when you are vulnerable, especially when you're tired, when you aren't getting the proper sleep, etc. So those emotions like to creep in when you are at your weakest, when you're at your most vulnerable, and getting enough sleep can help you to fight those off. Incorporate regular physical activity into each day. This doesn't have to be anything crazy. If you're Christmas shopping, you're going to be walking. Park a little further in the parking lot. Walk a little further, unless, of course, you live somewhere where it's like 20 below zero, and then don't go out. But incorporate regular physical activity into your day. You might already do this, but as the holidays get busier, it's harder to find that time. So set aside time and just create that space. And I know that can be, again, so hard. We have so much going on, right? And I sometimes get frustrated with all of the podcasts and articles and friends and whatever it is that say, oh, it's no big deal. It's only 15 minutes out of your day. But when you add up the things that people say to you all the time that are only 15 minutes out of your day, I think they add up to something like 27 hours. At least that's how it feels sometimes, right? But make time for those things that are important. And physical activity is going to help your feelings of stress and anxiety. It's true. I like to joke that exercise endorphins are a myth. I just, I joke a lot. I just can't help it because I have a love-hate relationship with the gym. And so I always say, nope, I'm just tired. No exercise endorphins. But as someone who does struggle with depression and anxiety, I do know that I feel better when I eat better, when I sleep, when I do incorporate regular physical activity. So don't skip those things during the holidays because you are trying to maintain a level of mental health that's going to enable you to get through the holidays and still be healthy afterwards. You don't want to get through the holidays. You don't want to barely get through the holidays and then collapse into a puddle of depressed, anxious, stress-filled goo. It's just not what you want to do, I promise. Number 9, take a breather. Make some time for yourself. Here's another thing, just 15 minutes. Spending just 15 minutes alone without distractions may refresh you enough to handle everything you need to do. You know yourself best. What is it that refreshes you, relaxes you, energizes you? Find that thing that you can incorporate that's going to reduce your stress by clearing your mind, slowing your breathing, and restoring inner calm. If you're a reader, find 15 minutes in the day to read. If that's walking, if that's meditating, if that's yoga, whatever it is, you know you best. So find that time during the day to re-energize, to reset for the day. Maybe you can listen to music. Hey, if you can find time to get a massage during the holidays, awesome. But find what works, and it's going to help your stress level immensely. Number 10, I think the absolute most important on top of all of these, 1 through 9, and that is seek professional help if you need it. Because despite our best efforts, despite hearing these lists and saying, yeah, that's a good idea, I can do that, I appreciate what I just heard, you can still find yourself feeling those persistent feelings of sadness or anxiety. You could still have a whole list of physical complaints. You might be unable to sleep. You could be irritable. You could feel hopeless. You could feel unable to face your normal routine. And if these feelings are lasting for any length of time, you need to talk to your doctor or a mental health professional. Please don't take your mental health, your physical health, please don't take your health for granted. There is help, especially if you're feeling hopeless. Talk to someone. Don't let that get bigger than it already is. The holidays can be so stressful. So please, if you hear nothing else that I'm saying tonight, don't face that alone. Talk to someone. If you don't want to go by yourself, talk to someone who will go with you, who will walk with you when you talk to your doctor or when you find a therapist or a psychiatrist or a counselor or whatever it is. But don't take your mental health for granted and don't think, oh, it'll go away. I'll be fine. So that's the list. Let's just go through it one more time. I'm not going to just... 1, acknowledge your feelings. 2, reach out. 3, be realistic. 4, set aside differences. 5, stick to a budget. 6, plan ahead. 7, learn to say no. 8, don't abandon healthy habits. 9, take a breather. And 10, seek professional help if you need it. So there you go, 10 tips for trying to get through the holidays and remain healthy, as healthy as you possibly can be. So I hope that some of these are helpful. I hope you will take the time to incorporate them into your holiday season. And I thank you for joining me on this episode of the Health and Wellness Podcast. I really hope that you will join me next week because we have a special episode coming up. I will be talking to Stacy Brookman, who has her own podcast, and she does work around life stories, and she does work around how learning to tell our life stories, learning to look at things that may have happened in our past can really help us heal and move into our future. So I'm very excited to talk to Stacy, and I hope you'll join me next week when I am talking with her, and I think we'll learn a lot together. So thank you again for joining me. I hope you'll join me again next time. In the meantime, you can find all of our podcasts at www.gsmcpodcast.com. You can download those podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere that you use and you have an app for your mobile devices. You can find our podcasts. You can follow us on social media, and I would love to hear from you. Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Again, thank you for joining me. Please join me again next time when my guest will be Stacy Brookman. In the meantime, have a wonderful and hopefully healthy week ahead of you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.